The fluorescent lights of Studio 12 hummed overhead as another mediocre contestant butchered Beethoven on the rented Yamaha upright. Marcus Webb sat behind the main production monitor, drumming his fingers on the desk, watching the ratings simulation software predict another episode of barely watchable television. This was what his career had become. 10 years ago, he had been making documentaries about real artists with real stories. Now he manufactured drama for Reality Star Search, a show that promised to discover hidden talent but mostly delivered cringe-worthy performances and manufactured sob stories. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Marcus was 42 years old and felt every single one of those years pressing down on his shoulders. His ex-wife had left him 3 years ago, taking their daughter Emma to Portland. She had said he cared more about television ratings than about real human connection. She was not entirely wrong. The divorce settlement and child support payments meant he could not afford to quit this job, no matter how much he hated what he had become. He needed the money. He needed the health insurance. He needed the stability, even if that stability came from producing garbage television. The current season of Reality Star Search was struggling. The network executives had made that abundantly clear in last week's meeting. Viewership was down 18% from the previous season. Social media engagement was practically non-existent. The show needed something big, something viral, something that would get people talking. Marcus had been put in charge of creating that something. His assistant producer, a 26-year-old named Jade who had far too much enthusiasm for reality television, bounded over to his station carrying 2 tablets and an energy drink. She had been with the show for only 8 months but had already proven herself invaluable. She understood social media in a way Marcus never would. She knew what made clips go viral, what got people sharing and commenting. "We need to talk about episode 7, Jade said, setting down one of the tablets in front of Marcus. "The piano segment is dying. We have had 3 contestants so far and they are all painfully average. Nobody is going to share videos of average piano players. We need something different." Marcus rubbed his tired eyes. "What do you suggest? Another sob story? Someone who learned piano to cope with tragedy? We have done that angle 12 times already." Jade shook her head, her ponytail swinging. "No, I am thinking we go the opposite direction. What if we set up a challenge that is designed to fail? What if we bring in someone who we think cannot possibly succeed, film the disaster, and turn it into a viral moment about authenticity versus pretension?" Marcus looked at her skeptically. "You want to humiliate someone on purpose?" Jade held up her hands defensively. "Not humiliate exactly. More like create a moment of truth. Think about it. Everyone is tired of overproduced reality television. They want real reactions, real emotions. What if we set up a classical piano challenge that is legitimately difficult, bring in someone who seems completely wrong for it, and just let whatever happens happen? If they fail, we get a viral moment about how not everyone is a hidden genius. If they somehow succeed, we get an even bigger viral moment about unexpected talent." Marcus considered this. It was cynical, manipulative, and exactly the kind of thing that made him hate his job. It was also probably going to work. The network would love it. The audience would eat it up. And maybe, just maybe, it would save his job for another season so he could keep making child support payments. "Fine," Marcus said. "But we do it right. We find someone who actually wants to participate, not some random person we ambush. And we make sure they know what they are getting into. I still have some standards, even if they are hanging by a thread." Jade grinned. "Already on it. I have been monitoring the contestant applications, and I think I found our person." She pulled up a file on her tablet and turned it so Marcus could see. The application showed a young woman, 29 years old, named Kenji Aoki. In her photo, she wore a fast food uniform and looked exhausted. Her application was filled out in neat handwriting that suggested someone who took even small things seriously. Kenji works at a burger chain in Carson City, Nevada, Jade explained. She applied 6 months ago but got rejected in the first round because her singing audition was terrible. Like, genuinely bad. But here is the interesting part. In the additional comments section, she mentioned that she had never had any formal training in anything artistic. No music lessons, no art classes, nothing. She said she just wanted to try something new, to see if she had any hidden talents. Marcus scrolled through the application. Kenji had written a short essay about why she wanted to be on the show. The writing was earnest, almost painfully so. She talked about feeling invisible in her daily life, about wanting to prove to herself that she was capable of more than flipping burgers and cleaning grease traps. She did not have a tragic backstory or a tear-jerking reason for being there. She just wanted a chance to be seen. Something about the application made Marcus uncomfortable. This was a real person with real hopes, and Jade was proposing they set her up to fail for entertainment value. But then again, Kenji had applied to be on a reality show. She knew what these programs were like. She was choosing to participate in this circus. What exactly is your plan? Marcus asked. Jade leaned forward, animated. We bring her in for episode 7. We tell her she made it to the next round and will be participating in a special classical piano challenge. We give her 1 week to prepare. We provide her with sheet music for something genuinely difficult, maybe Chopin's Fantasie Impromptu or Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody. Something that takes years of training to play properly. We fly her out here, put her on stage, and film whatever happens. And if she shows up and cannot play a single note? Marcus asked. Then we have an honest moment about how not everyone has hidden talents, Jade said. We frame it sensitively. We make it about the journey, about having the courage to try even when you might fail. It could actually be inspiring in its own way. And if by some miracle she can play? Then we have the viral moment of the century, Jade replied. Unknown fast food worker shocks reality show producers with hidden piano genius. That is a story that writes itself. Marcus stared at Kenji's application photo. There was something in her eyes that reminded him of himself 15 years ago, back when he still believed in making meaningful content, back before cynicism and financial necessity had worn him down. He wondered what his younger self would think of what he was about to do. All right, he said finally. Contact her. But I want to handle the initial call myself. And we give her a fair explanation of what the challenge involves. No surprises, no tricks. She deserves that much. Jade nodded, already typing notes into her tablet. I will set it up for tomorrow. That night, Marcus sat in his small apartment in Burbank, staring at Kenji's application on his laptop. His cat, a tabby named Hitchcock, jumped onto the desk and walked across the keyboard, leaving a trail of nonsense characters on the screen. Marcus scratched behind the cat's ears absently, thinking about the phone call he would make in the morning. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and distant traffic from the freeway. This was his life now. A one-bedroom apartment filled with forgotten takeout containers and equipment from productions he no longer cared about. His daughter Emma had visited last month, and he had seen the disappointment in her 12-year-old eyes when she looked around at how he lived. She had not said anything, but he knew what she was thinking. This was not the father she remembered, the one who used to talk passionately about storytelling and artistic integrity. Marcus opened his email and started typing a message to his ex-wife. He wanted to tell her he was trying, that he knew he had become someone neither of them recognized, that he was just trying to survive. But the words would not come. What could he say that would not sound like an excuse? He closed the laptop without sending anything. The next morning, Marcus arrived at the studio early. Jade had already prepared all the paperwork and had Kenji's phone number ready. Marcus sat in his small office, staring at the number on his screen for a full 5 minutes before dialing. He told himself this was just another aspect of his job, another task to complete. But his hand shook slightly as he pressed the call button. The phone rang 4 times before someone picked up. A female voice answered, slightly out of breath. Hello? Is this Kenji Aoki? Marcus asked. Yes, this is Kenji. Who is calling? My name is Marcus Webb. I am a producer for Reality Star Search. You submitted an application to our show about 6 months ago. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Oh, wow. I did not think anyone would ever call. I kind of forgot I even applied. Marcus glanced at the script Jade had prepared for him, then decided to ignore it. He was going to do this his own way. Well, we are calling now. Your application caught our attention, and we would like to invite you to participate in a special challenge for our upcoming episode. Kenji's voice became cautious. What kind of challenge? It is a piano challenge. We are featuring classical piano performances, and we are looking for contestants who are willing to try something outside their comfort zone. You mentioned in your application that you had never had formal artistic training. We thought this might be an interesting opportunity for you. But I do not know how to play piano, Kenji said. I have never touched a piano in my life. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. We understand that, Marcus replied. This challenge is about the journey, about being willing to try something completely new. We would give you 1 week to prepare. We would provide sheet music and online resources. Obviously, we do not expect you to become a concert pianist in 7 days. This is about effort, about courage, about showing our audience what it looks like to step outside your comfort zone. Kenji was quiet for a long moment. Marcus could hear background noise on her end, the beeping of restaurant equipment, someone calling out an order. She was at work. Can I ask you something honestly? Kenji said finally. Of course. Is this one of those things where you bring someone on to make fun of them? Where the whole point is to watch someone fail so the audience can feel superior? Marcus felt something twist in his chest. The question was too perceptive, too close to the truth. He looked at Jade through his office window. She was watching him, waiting to see if he could close the deal. I am not going to lie to you, Kenji. This is reality television. We are looking for compelling content, and yes, that sometimes includes watching people struggle. But I can promise you that we will not mock you or set you up for humiliation. If you come on the show and cannot play the piano, we will film your effort, not your failure. And who knows? Maybe you will surprise everyone, including yourself. What if I say no? Kenji asked. Then you say no, and we move on to someone else. This is completely voluntary. But I looked at your application, Kenji. You wrote that you wanted to be seen, that you wanted to prove to yourself you were capable of more. This is a chance to do that, even if it is scary. Kenji laughed, a sound that was half amusement, half disbelief. It is definitely scary. Can I think about it? Absolutely. Take until tomorrow to decide. Here is my direct number. Call me when you have made up your mind. After they hung up, Jade came into Marcus's office. Well? Did she agree? She is thinking about it, Marcus said. She will let us know tomorrow. Jade frowned. You should have pushed harder. We need her answer now so we can move forward with production. She is a person, not a content machine, Marcus snapped. She deserves time to make a decision that could potentially humiliate her on national television. We can wait 24 hours. Jade raised her eyebrows but did not argue. Fine. But if she says no, we need a backup plan. 22 hours later, Marcus's phone rang. It was Kenji. I will do it, she said without preamble. I do not know why, but I will do it. Maybe I am crazy. You are not crazy, Marcus said, though he was not entirely sure that was true. You are brave. That is different. So what happens now? Kenji asked. Now we make arrangements to fly you to Los Angeles next week. In the meantime, I am going to email you the sheet music we want you to attempt. It is a piece called Fantaisie Impromptu by Chopin. I am not going to lie to you, it is extremely difficult. Even trained pianists struggle with it. Your job is not to master it. Your job is to try. Okay, Kenji said. I will try. After he hung up, Marcus sat back in his chair and stared at the ceiling. What was he doing? This entire setup felt wrong, manipulative, cruel. But it was too late to back out now. The machinery of production was already in motion. All he could do was try to make sure Kenji was treated with as much dignity as possible. Over the next week, Marcus found himself thinking about Kenji more than he expected. Jade had set up a video check-in system so they could monitor the contestants' progress. Most people ignored it, but Kenji had been sending daily video updates. Marcus watched them late at night in his apartment, Hitchcock curled up beside him. In the first video, Kenji stood in what looked like a small apartment with peeling wallpaper. She had somehow gotten access to a keyboard, probably borrowed or rented. The thing looked ancient, with several keys that did not work properly. This is day one, Kenji said to her phone camera. I have been watching YouTube tutorials for the past 6 hours. My fingers hurt and I cannot even play the first measure properly. I have no idea what I have gotten myself into. The second video showed her looking more frustrated. Her hair was pulled back messily and she had dark circles under her eyes. I do not think I am going to sleep tonight. Every time I close my eyes, I see those stupid notes swimming around in my head. The right hand part is impossible. How does anyone move their fingers that fast? By the fourth video, something had shifted. Kenji looked tired but focused. Okay, so I figured out the first page. Kind of. It sounds terrible, but at least my fingers are going to the right places most of the time. I have been practicing 8 hours a day after my shifts. My manager thinks I have lost my mind. The sixth video showed Kenji actually playing a recognizable portion of the Chopin piece. It was slow, halting, filled with mistakes, but the melody was there. She was not looking at the camera, completely absorbed in what her hands were doing. When she finished the short section, she looked up with an expression Marcus could not quite read. It was exhaustion mixed with something else. Determination maybe. Or defiance. The final video came the night before Kenji was supposed to fly to Los Angeles. She looked directly at the camera, and Marcus noticed her eyes were red, like she had been crying. I do not know if anyone is watching these, but if you are, I want to say something. I know what this is. I know you probably brought me on this show because you think I am going to fail. And honestly, you are probably right. I have had 1 week to learn something that takes years to master. But I am going to walk out on that stage tomorrow and try anyway. Not because I think I will succeed, but because I want to know what it feels like to try something that scares me. I have spent my whole life playing it safe, being invisible, not taking risks. Just this once, I want to be brave. Even if I fall flat on my face, at least I will know I tried. Marcus watched that video 3 times. Something about it made his chest ache in a way he had not felt in years. This was not manufactured drama or scripted emotion. This was real. And he was about to put this real person in front of cameras in a studio audience for entertainment. He thought about calling the whole thing off. He could tell the network there had been a scheduling conflict, that they needed to push the segment to another episode. But what would that accomplish? Kenji had already done the work. She had already been brave. Taking that away from her now would be its own kind of cruelty. The day of the taping, Marcus arrived at Studio 12 3 hours early. The set designers had created an elaborate stage setup with dramatic lighting and a genuine Steinway grand piano that had been rented at enormous expense. The audience would not know that this whole segment had been designed around the expectation of failure, that every element had been chosen to make the challenge even more intimidating. Jade found Marcus standing on the empty stage, looking at the piano. The crew is ready, she said. Kenji lands in 2 hours. We will bring her directly from the airport to the studio. Hair and makeup will have about 45 minutes with her before we start taping. I want to meet with her first, Marcus said. Before makeup, before anything. Just a few minutes to talk. Jade looked like she wanted to argue but nodded. Fine. But keep it brief. We are on a tight schedule. When Kenji arrived at the studio, she looked small and overwhelmed. She wore jeans and a simple blouse, carrying a backpack that probably contained everything she had brought for the trip. Marcus met her in the green room, a small space with uncomfortable furniture and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly ill. Kenji, Marcus said, extending his hand. I am Marcus. We spoke on the phone. She shook his hand. Her grip was firm despite the nervousness Marcus could see in her eyes. This place is huge, she said. I did not realize how big everything would be. Television studios tend to be overwhelming, Marcus agreed. How are you feeling about the performance? Kenji laughed, a sound without much humor. Terrified. I barely slept on the plane. I kept practicing the fingering on my lap, and the woman next to me definitely thought I was crazy. Marcus sat down and gestured for Kenji to do the same. I want to be straight with you about something. This challenge is designed to be nearly impossible. We are not expecting you to play the piece perfectly. We are not even expecting you to play it well. What we are hoping for is a genuine moment, real emotion, real effort. That is what makes compelling television. So you do want me to fail, Kenji said. It was not quite an accusation, more like a statement of fact. No, Marcus said, surprising himself with his own honesty. I do not want you to fail. I want you to be yourself. Whatever happens out there, happens. But I want you to know that the outcome does not matter as much as the attempt. You have already done something brave by coming here. The rest is just details. Kenji studied his face for a long moment. You do not seem like the other producers I have met today. They all seem excited, almost giddy. You seem sad. Marcus did not know how to respond to that. Maybe because I used to make different kinds of television. Things that mattered. Now I make reality shows where we set people up in difficult situations for ratings. It pays the bills, but it does not make me proud. Then why do it? Kenji asked. Because I have a daughter who needs health insurance and a good school and a stable life. Because my ex-wife was right when she said I made bad choices and prioritized the wrong things. Because quitting would be brave and I am not nearly as brave as you are. The honesty surprised both of them. They sat in silence for a moment before Jade knocked on the door. We need to get Kenji into hair and makeup. We tape in 90 minutes. The show's format was simple. The host, a former boy band member named Trevor Walsh who had pivoted to television hosting, would introduce the segment and bring out the contestant. There would be a brief interview, then the performance, then feedback from the 3 judges. The whole thing would take about 15 minutes of airtime after editing. Marcus watched from behind the main camera as the audience filed in. They had no idea what they were about to see. They just knew they were going to watch Reality Star Search, a show that promised drama and discovery in equal measure. Kenji stood backstage, barely recognizable after the hair and makeup team had worked their magic. They had styled her in a simple but elegant black dress that made her look older, more polished. She kept twisting her hands together nervously, and Marcus could see her lips moving silently. She was probably running through the finger patterns she had memorized. Trevor began his introduction. Tonight, we have something special for you. We challenged one of our contestants to attempt something she has never done before. Kenji Aoki works at a fast food restaurant in Nevada. 1 week ago, we gave her the sheet music to one of the most difficult piano pieces ever written and asked her to try to learn it. No lessons, no training, just 7 days of practice. Let's see what happened. The audience applauded as Kenji walked out onto the stage. The lights were blindingly bright, and Marcus could see her squinting slightly. She sat down at the piano bench and adjusted her position. Her hands hovered over the keys. Trevor walked over with his microphone. Kenji, how are you feeling right now? Like I might throw up, Kenji said honestly, and the audience laughed. But also ready. I think. Maybe. I do not know. You have been practicing Chopin's Fantaisie Impromptu for 1 week. That is a piece that typically takes years to master. What made you think you could learn it in 7 days? I did not think I could, Kenji admitted. But I wanted to try anyway. Sometimes you have to do things that scare you, right? Otherwise you spend your whole life wondering what if. Trevor nodded approvingly. Well, the judges and our audience are ready to hear what you have prepared. Whenever you are ready. He stepped back, and the studio fell silent. Marcus held his breath. This was the moment everything had been building toward. Kenji closed her eyes for a few seconds, taking deep breaths. Then she opened them and looked down at the piano keys. She began to play. The first notes were tentative, careful. Her right hand moved through the opening melody with deliberate precision. It was not beautiful, not yet. It was the sound of someone concentrating intensely, someone trying to remember patterns they had drilled into muscle memory over countless hours of practice. Her left hand came in with the accompaniment, and for a moment the two hands struggled to coordinate. She stumbled, her fingers hitting wrong notes, and Marcus saw her jaw clench. But she did not stop. She kept going, working through the mistakes, pushing forward even when the music did not sound right. The audience was completely silent, watching this young woman battle her way through a piece that was leagues beyond her skill level. It was uncomfortable television, awkward and difficult, exactly what Jade had wanted. Then something shifted. About 45 seconds into the piece, Kenji's shoulders relaxed slightly. Her hands began to move with a bit more confidence. The notes started to flow together instead of sounding choppy and disconnected. It was still far from perfect, still filled with errors and hesitations, but there was a musicality emerging that had not been there at the beginning. Marcus leaned forward, watching the monitors more closely. Something was happening. The cameras were capturing it too. Kenji's face had changed. The nervous tension had been replaced by concentration, but also by something else. She looked almost peaceful, lost in the music despite all its imperfections. The piece built to its central section, the part where both hands fly across the keyboard in rapid, cascading notes. This was the section that had probably seemed impossible when Kenji first looked at the sheet music. And she could not play it, not really. Her fingers tangled, notes dropped out, the rhythm faltered. But she was trying, fighting her way through every measure, refusing to give up even when the music fell apart around her. In the control booth, the director was frantically signaling to Marcus. "This is not what we planned," he whispered urgently. "Should we stop the tape?" "No," Marcus said. "Keep rolling." Kenji reached the final section of the piece, where the opening melody returns. Her hands were shaking now, probably from exhaustion as much as nerves. But she played those last phrases with something approaching grace. The final chord rang out, sustained by the piano's natural resonance, and then faded into silence. The studio remained quiet for what felt like an eternity. Kenji sat at the piano bench, her hands still resting on the keys, her chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. She did not turn to look at the audience or the judges. She just sat there, alone with what she had done. Then someone in the audience started clapping. Then another person. Then the entire studio was applauding, not the polite golf clap of a reality show audience but genuine, enthusiastic applause. People were standing up. Marcus saw tears on several faces in the crowd. Trevor walked back over to Kenji, who finally turned around on the bench. Her eyes were wet. "That was incredible," Trevor said. "How do you feel?" Kenji wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I messed up so many parts. The middle section was a disaster. I probably hit more wrong notes than right notes." "But you did not stop," Trevor said. "That is what we all just witnessed. You could have given up at any point, but you kept going. Tell us, what were you thinking about while you played?" Kenji took a shaky breath. "I was thinking about every hour I practiced this week. About sitting in my apartment at 3 in the morning, trying to get my fingers to do things they did not know how to do. About all the times in my life I have given up before really trying because I was afraid of failing. And I decided that this time, just this once, I was going to finish what I started, even if it was not perfect. The judges gave their feedback. All three of them acknowledged that the performance had been technically flawed, but all three also said they had been moved by Kenji's determination and courage. One of the judges, a classically trained musician, admitted that he was not sure he would have had the guts to attempt that piece with only a week of preparation. After the cameras stopped rolling and the audience left, Kenji sat alone on the stage, still at the piano. Marcus walked over and sat down beside her on the bench. "You surprised everyone today," he said. "Including me." "Did I surprise myself?" Kenji asked. She played a few random notes, gentle sounds that hung in the air. "I am not sure. I knew I would not be able to play it perfectly. I knew I would make mistakes. But I wanted to know what it would feel like to try something impossible. And now I know." "What does it feel like?" Marcus asked. "Terrifying," Kenji said. "But also kind of incredible. Like maybe I have been underestimating myself my whole life." Marcus thought about his own life, about the compromises he had made, the dreams he had set aside. When was the last time he had done something that scared him? When was the last time he had tried something just to see if he could? "I need to tell you something," Marcus said. "This whole challenge, it was designed around the assumption that you would fail. We thought we would get a viral moment out of watching someone attempt the impossible and fall short. That was the plan." Kenji looked at him. "I kind of figured that out. I am not stupid. But here's what I did not expect," Marcus continued. "I did not expect to be inspired. I did not expect to watch you out there and remember what it feels like to care about something, to really try. You reminded me of something I forgot a long time ago." "What is that?" Kenji asked. "That courage is not about succeeding. It is about being willing to fail publicly, to risk looking foolish, to try anyway. You did that today, and it mattered." They sat in silence for a few moments, the empty studio stretching out around them. Finally, Kenji stood up and extended her hand to Marcus. "Thank you for giving me this chance. Even if it was supposed to make me look bad, I am glad I did it." Marcus shook her hand. The episode aired 3 weeks later, and just as Jade had predicted, the clip went viral. But not in the way anyone had expected. People were not sharing it to mock Kenji or to laugh at her mistakes. They were sharing it because they found it inspiring. The comments sections filled with messages from people saying they had been moved to tears, that they were going to try something they had been too afraid to attempt, that Kenji had reminded them what real courage looked like. The episode got the highest ratings of the season. The network executives were thrilled. They wanted Marcus to produce more segments like this, more impossible challenges, more ordinary people attempting extraordinary things. But Marcus had something else in mind. He called a meeting with the network executives and pitched a new show. Not a reality competition, but a documentary series about ordinary people attempting things they never thought possible. Real stories, real attempts, real failures and successes. No manufactured drama, no scripted moments. Just authentic human experience. The executives were skeptical. Reality competitions were proven moneymakers. Documentaries were risky. But the viral success of Kenji's segment had given Marcus leverage he had not had in years. After 3 meetings and countless revisions, they greenlit a pilot episode. Marcus called Kenji to tell her the news. The show was going to be called Impossible Things, and he wanted her to be featured in the first episode, showing her journey from fast food worker to someone who had discovered a passion for music. "I am not going to be a professional pianist," Kenji said when he explained the concept. "I am still terrible at piano. I just practice for fun now." "That is exactly the point," Marcus told her. "This is not about becoming a professional. It is about discovering that you are capable of more than you thought. That is the story I want to tell." Kenji agreed, and over the next 6 months, Marcus filmed her journey. She was still working at the burger restaurant, but she had bought herself a used digital piano and was taking online lessons. She was not getting dramatically better, at least not in the way reality television usually shows transformation. But she was enjoying the process, finding joy in small improvements, in the simple act of making music however imperfectly. The pilot episode of Impossible Things aired on a Tuesday night in a terrible time slot. Marcus had no expectations for ratings. But by Wednesday morning, it was trending on social media. People were sharing clips, writing blog posts, creating response videos. The message was resonating. Not everyone had to be exceptional at something for it to be worthwhile. The trying itself had value. The network ordered a full season. Marcus hired Jade as his co-producer. She brought her understanding of viral content, but they made a pact to never manipulate their subjects, to never set people up for failure. They would show real attempts at growth, wherever those attempts led. Over the next 2 years, Marcus produced 20 episodes of Impossible Things. He filmed an accountant who tried to learn to paint, a truck driver who attempted to write a novel, a retired teacher who decided to start a YouTube channel about science experiments. Some of them succeeded in conventional terms. Most of them did not. But all of them grew in the trying. The show won a documentary Emmy. Marcus's ex-wife called to congratulate him. She had watched every episode with Emma, and their daughter wanted him to know she was proud. That phone call meant more to Marcus than any award. On the night of the Emmy ceremony, Marcus sat at a table with his small production team. Kenji had flown in for the event, taking time off from her job. She looked uncomfortable in her formal dress but was smiling. When they announced Impossible Things as the winner, Marcus stood up to accept the award, and on impulse, he asked Kenji to come up on stage with him. Standing in front of hundreds of television industry professionals, Marcus held the Emmy statue and looked out at the audience. This award belongs to all the ordinary people who let us film them trying impossible things. But especially to Kenji Aoki, who had the courage to sit down at a piano she did not know how to play and try anyway. She reminded me why I wanted to make television in the first place. To tell true stories about real courage. Thank you, Kenji. The audience applauded as Kenji wiped tears from her eyes. Afterward, at the after-party, people kept coming up to them, asking about the show, sharing their own stories of attempting things they feared. Marcus realized that Kenji's moment at that piano had created ripples that were still spreading outward, touching people in ways neither of them could have predicted. Late that night, after the parties ended, Marcus sat in his hotel room and video called Emma. She was supposed to be asleep, but he knew she would be waiting to hear about the ceremony. When her face appeared on the screen, she was grinning. "Dad, you won an Emmy," she said, bouncing slightly with excitement. "Everyone at school is going to be so jealous." Marcus smiled. "I wish you could have been there. Mom recorded the whole ceremony. We watched you give your speech. It was really good. You seemed happy." "I am happy," Marcus realized. For the first time in a long time, he actually meant it. "Hey Emma, can I tell you something?" "Sure, what?" "I am proud of the work I am doing now. I know I messed up a lot of things, and I was not a great dad for a while there. But I am trying to do better. To make things that matter." Emma was quiet for a moment. "I know, Dad. I can tell. The show is really cool. My English teacher showed one of the episodes in class and we had a whole discussion about it. It was weird hearing people talk about my dad's show, but also kind of awesome." They talked for a few more minutes before Emma's mother came in and gently reminded her it was past midnight. Marcus said goodnight and sat back against the hotel pillows, holding the Emmy statue in his lap. Hitchcock would be so confused when he brought this thing home. 6 months later, Marcus was in the studio working on season 3 of Impossible Things when he got an unexpected email. It was from a music school in Las Vegas. They had seen the original episode with Kenji and her piano challenge. They wanted to know if Marcus would be interested in filming a story about their community program that provided free music lessons to working adults. Marcus forwarded the email to Jade. "What do you think?" he asked when she came into his office. "I think it could be good," she said. But we should probably check with Kenji first. She might want to be involved. They called Kenji together on speakerphone. When they explained the email, she laughed. You know I'm still not very good at piano, right? I can play a few pieces decently, but I'm not going to wow anyone. That is not the point, Marcus said. The point is you kept trying. That is what inspired the school to start their program. They said your story made them realize there was a need for adult beginners who wanted to learn music not to become professionals, but just to enrich their lives. Kenji agreed to visit the music school in Las Vegas, and Marcus brought a small crew to film the experience. The school was located in a modest building on the edge of downtown, far from the glittering casinos and tourist attractions. Inside, the walls were covered with photos of students at various recitals, people of all ages holding instruments and smiling with pride. The director of the school was a woman in her 50s named Patricia Mendez. She had been teaching music for 30 years, first in public schools until budget cuts eliminated her position, then privately in her home, and finally at this community center that served primarily low-income adults. Patricia had gray streaks in her dark hair and wore reading glasses on a chain around her neck. When she met Kenji, she hugged her immediately. You have no idea what your story meant to my students, Patricia said. Half of them are terrified they started too late, that they will never be good enough. Watching you just try, just put yourself out there, it gave them permission to be imperfect. The school had 23 students currently enrolled, all adults between the ages of 25 and 68. They worked various jobs during the day. There was a postal worker learning violin, a hotel maid studying voice, a construction foreman taking guitar lessons, a casino dealer attempting saxophone. Each of them had their own reasons for wanting to learn music, but they all shared a common fear of judgment, of being too old, of starting too late. Marcus interviewed several of the students over the course of 3 days. A woman named Lorraine, who worked the night shift at a hospital as a janitor, told him she had always wanted to play cello but her family could not afford lessons when she was young. Now at 43, she was finally learning. Her hands were rough from years of cleaning work, and she struggled to develop the calluses needed for pressing down the strings, but she practiced every day during her lunch break in an empty hospital chapel. A man named Robert, 62 years old and recently retired from a career in accounting, had taken up trumpet. He said his wife had died 2 years ago and the silence in his house had become unbearable. The trumpet gave him something to focus on, something that filled the empty rooms with sound, even if that sound was frequently off-key and squeaky. He was not trying to join an orchestra. He just wanted to play when the saints go marching in without completely embarrassing himself. Marcus filmed them during their lessons, during practice sessions, during their small informal recitals where they performed for each other in a room that could barely hold 30 people. There was something deeply moving about watching these adults struggle with instruments, making mistakes that children would make, but with the self-consciousness and vulnerability that only adults possess. They knew how they sounded. They knew they were not prodigies. But they were doing it anyway. On the final day of filming, Patricia organized a special event. She invited Kenji to play something for the students, anything she felt comfortable with. Kenji looked nervous when Patricia made the request, but she agreed. The students gathered in the small performance room, sitting on folding chairs and benches. Marcus set up cameras but tried to keep them unobtrusive. This was not about creating a television moment. This was about capturing something genuine. Kenji sat at the upright piano in the corner of the room. It was an old instrument, probably donated years ago, with a few keys that stuck in a tone that was not quite in tune. She had not brought any sheet music. She simply sat for a moment with her hands in her lap, looking at the keys. I am going to play the piece I learned for the reality show, she said to the assembled students. It is called Fantaisie Impromptu by Chopin. I am going to mess up, probably multiple times, because I still have not mastered it and I probably never will. But I love it anyway. I love how it sounds when I get it right, and I even kind of love how it sounds when I get it wrong, because it reminds me that I am trying. She began to play. Her performance was better than it had been on the television show 2 years ago, but it was still far from perfect. Her fingers stumbled in the same difficult passages. The tempo wavered. She hit wrong notes and had to backtrack to find her place. But there was something beautiful about the imperfection, about the visible effort, about the refusal to give up even when the music did not flow easily. When she finished, the students applauded warmly. Several of them had tears in their eyes. Lorraine, the hospital janitor learning cello, raised her hand tentatively. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course," Kenji replied. "Do you ever feel embarrassed? Like, when you mess up in front of people, do you feel like you should not even bother?" Kenji considered the question carefully. "All the time," she said honestly. "Every time I sit down to play, part of me thinks I should quit because I am not good enough and I never will be. But then I remember that good enough is not really the point. The point is that I am doing something that brings me joy, that challenges me, that makes me feel alive. If I stopped just because I was not perfect, I would be letting fear make my decisions for me." After the filming wrapped in Las Vegas, Marcus returned to Los Angeles with hours of footage and a growing sense that the show was evolving into something more significant than he had initially imagined. Impossible Things was no longer just a documentary series about people attempting challenges. It was becoming a meditation on what it means to live authentically, to pursue growth and creativity without the guarantee of success or recognition. The episode featuring Patricia's music school aired during season 3 and became one of the most watched episodes of the series. The response was overwhelming. Marcus received emails from people all over the country saying they had been inspired to take up hobbies they had abandoned or try things they had always been too afraid to attempt. Music schools reported increases in adult enrollment. Community centers started programs specifically designed for older beginners. One email in particular stuck with Marcus. It was from a man in Ohio who had watched the episode with his elderly father. The father had played piano as a young man but had stopped when he got married and started a family. He had not touched a piano in 45 years. After watching Kenji and the music school students, he had asked his son to take him to a music store. They bought a small keyboard, and the father had started practicing again. The son wrote that his father seemed happier than he had been in years, that music had given him a sense of purpose and joy that had been missing from his retirement. Marcus printed that email and kept it on his desk. When the pressures of production became overwhelming, when network executives pushed for more dramatic content or faster pacing, he would read that email and remember why the show mattered. Meanwhile, Kenji's life had changed in unexpected ways. The viral success of her piano performance had led to numerous opportunities. She had been interviewed on morning talk shows, featured in magazine articles about overcoming fear and embracing imperfection. A motivational speaker had contacted her about appearing at conferences. A book agent had reached out about writing a memoir. But Kenji had turned down most of these opportunities. She was still working at the burger restaurant in Carson City, though now she was a shift manager making slightly better money. She practiced piano for an hour every morning before work and took online lessons twice a week. She had started learning other instruments too, picking up a used guitar at a pawn shop and teaching herself basic chords through YouTube videos. When Marcus called to check in on her, she explained her philosophy. "I am not trying to become famous or build a career out of this," she said. "I am just trying to live a fuller life. Music is part of that, but so is my job and my friends and my routine. I do not want to turn this into pressure or obligation. I want it to stay joyful." Marcus admired her clarity and boundaries. In an age where everyone seemed desperate for internet fame and viral success, Kenji had chosen to keep her life small and manageable. She understood that the viral moment had been just that, a moment, and she was not going to let it define her entire existence. The 4th season of Impossible Things expanded beyond individual stories to explore communities of people attempting growth together. Marcus and his team filmed a group of retirees learning to code so they could build apps for their grandchildren. They documented a book club in rural Montana where farmers met monthly to discuss literature and write their own short stories. They followed a group of formerly incarcerated individuals learning to play instruments together as part of a rehabilitation program. Each story reinforced the same themes. Growth was possible at any age. Perfection was not the goal. Community and effort mattered more than individual achievement. The trying itself was valuable, regardless of outcome. During the filming of Season 4, Marcus received news that his ex-wife Rebecca was getting remarried. She called him personally to tell him, wanting him to hear it directly rather than through Emma. Marcus congratulated her genuinely. Rebecca had found someone who made her happy, who was present and available in ways Marcus had never managed to be. He was glad for her. The conversation shifted to Emma, who was now 15 and thinking about college. She wants to study film production, Rebecca said. I think you can guess where that interest came from. She watches every episode of your show, Marcus. She is proud of you. Can I tell you something? Marcus said. Making this show, telling these stories, it has made me a better person. I still have regrets about how things ended between us, about the years I wasted being cynical and disconnected. But I am grateful that I found my way back to work that matters. I can tell, Rebecca replied. Emma can tell too. That is what matters now. Not what you did wrong before, but what you are doing right now. After they hung up, Marcus sat in his office thinking about the strange path his life had taken. A manipulative reality show segment designed to manufacture viral content had accidentally led him back to authentic storytelling. An attempt to exploit someone's failure had instead revealed genuine courage. Sometimes, he thought, you stumble into meaning by accident, and if you are wise, you recognize it and hold on. The 5th season of Impossible Things took a different approach. Instead of filming multiple separate stories, Marcus decided to follow one group of people over an entire year as they attempted to learn an orchestral piece together. None of them were trained musicians. Most had never played an instrument before. But a community center in Detroit had started a program bringing together adults from different neighborhoods, different backgrounds, different races, and economic circumstances, to learn music collectively. The group consisted of 32 people ranging in age from 22 to 74. There was an auto worker, a social worker, a barista, a retired postal worker, a yoga instructor, a mechanic, several teachers, a few college students, a nurse, and various others. Patricia from the Las Vegas Music School had heard about the program and recommended it to Marcus as a potential subject for the show. The director of the program was a man named James Crawford, a former professional oboist who had played with various orchestras before a hand injury ended his performing career. James had started the community orchestra program 5 years ago with just 8 participants. It had grown slowly but steadily, fueled by word of mouth and a genuine need for creative community spaces in a city that had been economically devastated. Marcus and a small crew embedded themselves with the orchestra for 12 months. They filmed weekly rehearsals, individual practice sessions, moments of frustration and breakthrough, conflicts that arose and were resolved, friendships that developed between unlikely people. The piece they were working toward was a simplified arrangement of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, specifically the famous Ode to Joy section. It had been adapted for amateur players but was still technically and musically demanding. In the early weeks, the rehearsals were chaotic. People struggled to read music, to keep time, to play in tune with each other. The strings section sounded scratchy and uncertain. The woodwind squeaked. The brass section was too loud and often off-pitch. James remained patient, breaking down passages into small sections, working with individual sections separately, slowly building towards something cohesive. Marcus interviewed the participants regularly, asking them why they had joined, what they hoped to gain, how they felt about the process. A woman named Diane, 68 years old and learning violin for the first time, said she had joined because her husband had died and she needed something to fill the evenings. The orchestra gave her a reason to leave the house, a community of people who expected her presence, a challenge that required her full attention. A young man named Marcus, coincidentally sharing the producer's name, worked at an auto parts store during the day and practiced trumpet at night. He said music was the only thing in his life that felt purely his own, not connected to bills or responsibilities or other people's expectations. When he played trumpet, even badly, he felt free. As the months progressed, Marcus watched the orchestra gradually improve. It happened slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. But by month 5, they were starting to sound like an actual ensemble rather than a collection of individuals making noise. They were listening to each other, responding to James's conducting, finding moments of genuine musical cohesion. But the transformation was not just musical. Marcus noticed that relationships were forming across boundaries that typically kept people separated. The retired postal worker and the college student started carpooling to rehearsals together, forming an unlikely friendship despite their age difference. The auto worker and the social worker, who came from very different political and cultural backgrounds, bonded over their shared frustration with the difficulty of the music and began practicing together outside of regular rehearsals. One of the most moving storylines emerged around a woman named Keisha, a 34-year-old nurse who played cello. Keisha was a single mother of 2 and worked 12-hour shifts at a hospital. Finding time to practice was nearly impossible, and she frequently arrived at rehearsals exhausted and unprepared. James pulled her aside several times to ask if she wanted to take a break from the orchestra, to come back when her life was less demanding. But Keisha refused. "This is the only hour of my week that is just for me," she told Marcus during an interview. "Everything else is about my kids or my patients or my bills. When I am here, I am just Keisha the cellist, even if I am a terrible cellist. I need this." Marcus filmed Keisha practicing at 2 in the morning after her shift, sitting in her small apartment with her kids asleep in the next room, working through the same 8 bars of music over and over, fighting to keep her eyes open. There was something heroic about her determination, about her refusal to let exhaustion or circumstance steal this small piece of creativity and self-expression from her life. By month 8, the orchestra was preparing for their public performance. James had secured a space at a local community theater. They would perform for family and friends, a small audience of maybe 100 people. It was not Carnegie Hall, but for the participants, it felt monumental. Most of them had never performed music publicly before. The anxiety in the rehearsals became palpable as the date approached. 2 weeks before the performance, disaster struck. Keisha's daughter got sick and had to be hospitalized. It was nothing life-threatening, but it required Keisha to take time off work and be at the hospital constantly. She missed 3 rehearsals in a row. When she finally returned to practice, she looked hollowed out by stress and lack of sleep. "I do not think I can do the performance," she told James after rehearsal. "I have not practiced in 2 weeks. I am going to bring everyone else down." James sat down next to her, his kind face lined with concern. "What do you want to do? Not what you think you should do, but what do you actually want?" "I want to play," Keisha said, tears forming in her eyes. "I want to be part of this. But I am terrified of messing up, of being the weak link." "Then play," James said simply. "Everyone here messes up. This orchestra has never played a perfect rehearsal. That is not what we are about. We are about showing up and trying together. If you want to be there, be there. We will adjust around whatever happens." Marcus captured this conversation on film, and it became one of the emotional centerpieces of the season. The question of what it meant to participate imperfectly, to contribute even when you could not give your best, to show up despite fear of inadequacy. These were questions everyone in the audience could relate to. The night of the performance arrived. Marcus had cameras positioned throughout the theater, capturing the audience filing in, the orchestra members warming up backstage, the nervous energy that filled the space. The participants wore all black as James had requested, trying to look like a proper orchestra despite their amateur status. Kenji had flown in to attend the performance. She sat in the audience next to Marcus's daughter Emma, who had asked to come along for the filming. At 15, Emma was seriously considering film school and had been apprenticing with her father during summer breaks. She was operating one of the cameras that night, documenting the audience reactions. James walked out onto the stage to introduce the performance. He spoke briefly about the orchestra's mission, about creating spaces for adult beginners, about the courage it takes to try something new in front of others. Then he turned to the orchestra and raised his baton. The performance was imperfect from the first note. There were timing issues, intonation problems, moments where sections came in at the wrong time or played wrong notes. But there was also something undeniably moving about watching these ordinary people create music together. When they reached the famous Ode to Joy melody, the one that most people in the audience recognized, something magical happened. The orchestra found its groove, all 32 players suddenly in sync, playing with confidence and joy that transcended their technical limitations. Marcus watched through the camera monitor as audience members began to cry. These were not tears of pity or second-hand embarrassment. They were tears of recognition, of seeing themselves reflected in these imperfect performers, of being reminded that beauty does not require perfection, that community and effort can create something meaningful even when the execution is flawed. Keisha played through the entire piece without any major mistakes. Her face showed fierce concentration mixed with something that looked like liberation. When the final note faded and the audience erupted in applause, she put her face in her hands and wept. The cellists on either side of her put their arms around her shoulders, and Marcus captured that moment of communal support and triumph. After the performance, Marcus interviewed several audience members. A woman whose sister played French horn said she had not understood why her sister spent so much time on something she was not particularly good at, but now she got it. It was not about being good. It was about being part of something bigger than yourself, about the act of creation regardless of outcome. A man whose husband played viola said watching the performance had made him want to try something creative himself, something he had been putting off because he did not think he had talent. Maybe talent was not the prerequisite he had always believed it to be. The season finale episode featuring the Detroit Community Orchestra aired 6 months later. It was longer than typical episodes, nearly 90 minutes, and the network had been skeptical about giving that much time to amateur musicians struggling through Beethoven. But Marcus had fought for it, arguing that the story needed space to breathe, to show the full arc of growth and community building. The episode became the most watched in the show's history. It sparked conversations on social media about arts education, about the value of amateur creative pursuits, about making space for imperfection in an increasingly polished and curated culture. Several cities reached out to James Crawford asking how to start similar programs in their communities. Marcus received a message through the show's website from a man who identified himself as a music educator. He wrote that he had spent his entire career trying to identify and nurture talented students, the ones who might become professional musicians. But watching impossible things had made him reconsider his approach. What about all the students who loved music but did not have exceptional talent? What about the joy and growth that came from musical participation regardless of professional potential? The message ended with a question. Had he been serving the wrong students all these years? Marcus thought about that question for days. It connected to larger questions about how society valued different kinds of achievement, about who got resources and support and recognition. The culture celebrated prodigies and professionals but often dismissed or even mocked adult beginners and hobbyists. But what if the hobbyists were doing something just as valuable, maybe more valuable, than the professionals? What if the process of creative struggle was more important than the polished final product? These questions informed the direction of Season 6. Marcus decided to explore the difference between professional excellence and amateur joy, to examine what gets lost when society only values the former. He filmed master classes where renowned musicians taught community orchestra members, capturing the moments of mutual learning that occurred. The professionals learned about teaching patience and finding joy in fundamentals. The amateurs learned techniques from world-class players. Both sides grew from the exchange. One particularly memorable segment featured a famous concert pianist named Margaret Chiu who agreed to give a masterclass to adult piano students, including Kenji. Margaret was in her 60s, internationally acclaimed, with a career spanning 4 decades. She had performed in the greatest concert halls in the world. Marcus had expected her to be intimidating or condescending toward amateur players. But Margaret surprised him. She worked with each student individually, focusing not on fixing their technical flaws but on helping them find emotional connection to the music. When Kenji played her now familiar Fantasie Impromptu, Margaret stopped her midway through. "You are thinking too much about your fingers, Margaret said gently. You are worried about hitting the right notes. But music is not about right notes. It is about expressing something true. What do you want to say with this piece? Kenji looked confused. I do not know. I just want to play it correctly. Margaret shook her head. Forget correct. Correct is boring. Why did you choose this piece? What drew you to it? Kenji thought for a moment. I chose it because it seemed impossible. Because attempting it scared me. Because it was beautiful and I wanted to be part of that beauty, even if I could not fully capture it. Then play that, Margaret said. Play the fear and the desire and the reaching towards something beyond your grasp. Let the wrong notes be part of the story. They are honest. They show the struggle. Kenji played the piece again, and this time something shifted. She was still making mistakes, but the mistakes felt different, less like failures and more like part of the emotional landscape. When she finished, Margaret was smiling. That was real, Margaret said. That was music, not just notes. If I had to choose between technically perfect playing with no soul and imperfect playing with genuine emotion, I would choose the latter every time. After the masterclass, Marcus interviewed Margaret privately. She spoke about her own journey as a musician, about the pressure to be perfect, about competitions and critics and the constant evaluation of her performances. She admitted that somewhere along the way, she had lost touch with why she had started playing piano in the first place. It had become about achievement and recognition rather than joy and expression. Watching these adult beginners, Margaret said, I am reminded of my 6-year-old self, sitting at my grandmother's piano and just playing because it felt good. No pressure, no judgment, just pure creative play. These amateurs have something I lost somewhere along the way. They have that sense of play. The conversation with Margaret became a turning point in how Marcus thought about the show. Impossible Things was not just about encouraging amateurs to try creative pursuits. It was also about reminding everyone, including professionals, about the intrinsic value of creative activity separate from achievement or recognition. It was about reclaiming play and experimentation and joy in a culture that had become obsessed with optimization and perfection. Season 7 of Impossible Things shifted focus to explore this tension more explicitly. Marcus filmed professional artists who were trying to reconnect with the playful, experimental aspects of their crafts. He documented a successful novelist who started writing terrible poetry just for fun, specifically aiming to write badly to free herself from the pressure of her literary reputation. He followed a gallery-represented painter who began making art with his non-dominant hand to rediscover the frustration and delight of being a beginner. One of the most powerful stories that season featured a former Olympic gymnast named Vanessa Cole. Vanessa had competed in 2 Olympic Games in her 20s, winning medals and becoming a household name. But the pressure and physical toll of elite athletics had led to burnout and injury. She retired at 26, physically broken and emotionally exhausted. Now at 39, she had started taking recreational gymnastics classes at a local gym, practicing alongside children and teenagers who had no idea who she was. Marcus filmed Vanessa attempting skills she had once performed effortlessly but now struggled with. Her body could not do what it once did. She fell repeatedly, got frustrated, sometimes cried. But she kept coming back to the gym every week, drawn by something she could not quite articulate. When I was competing, I hated gymnastics, Vanessa told Marcus during an interview. It was pressure and pain and constant evaluation. Every move I made was judged, scored, compared to others. I won medals, but I was miserable. Now I am terrible at gymnastics compared to what I used to be, but I actually love it. I love just moving and trying things and not caring if I fall. Marcus asked her what had changed. Why could she love it now when she had hated it before? Vanessa thought carefully before answering. Before, it was not mine. It belonged to coaches and judges and sponsors and the whole apparatus of elite sports. Now it belongs to me. I do it because I want to, not because I have to. That makes all the difference. That conversation encapsulated something essential that Marcus had been trying to articulate through the show. Ownership. Autonomy. The difference between doing something because external forces demanded it versus doing something because it brought personal joy or meaning. The amateurs and hobbyists featured on Impossible Things had something that many professionals lacked. They had chosen their creative pursuits freely, without the pressure of making a living or achieving recognition. That freedom, paradoxically, allowed for deeper engagement and satisfaction. As the show gained prominence and influence, Marcus started receiving speaking invitations. Universities wanted him to talk about documentary filmmaking and authentic storytelling. Education conferences wanted him to discuss the value of amateur creative pursuits. Corporate retreats wanted him to inspire employees to think differently about growth and failure. Marcus accepted some of these invitations, partly for the additional income but mostly because he felt he had something important to say. His talks were never polished or slick. He spoke honestly about his own journey from cynical reality TV producer to someone trying to make meaningful work. He talked about Kenji and how a moment designed to manufacture failure had instead revealed courage. He talked about the Detroit Orchestra and Patricia's music school and all the people who had taught him that trying was valuable regardless of outcome. After one such talk at a film school, a student approached Marcus. She was maybe 21 years old, carrying the weight of artistic ambition and insecurity that Marcus remembered from his own youth. She asked him how to know if she was good enough to make it as a filmmaker, if she should keep pursuing this dream or choose something more practical. Marcus did not have an easy answer for her. He thought about the question seriously before responding. I cannot tell you if you are good enough because I do not think that is the right question. The question is whether making films is something you need to do, whether it brings you meaning and purpose regardless of whether you achieve recognition or commercial success. If you need external validation to feel like your work matters, this is going to be a painful career. But if the work itself is valuable to you, if you can find satisfaction in the process and growth rather than just the outcomes, then keep going. The student looked uncertain, probably hoping for more concrete encouragement. Marcus understood. When you are young and ambitious, you want someone to tell you that you are special, that you will make it. But Marcus had learned that specialness was not the point. Persistence was. Finding meaning in the work itself was. Being brave enough to keep trying even when you are not exceptional was. 8 years after Kenji's appearance on Reality Star Search, Marcus was contacted by a major streaming service. They wanted to license all 7 seasons of Impossible Things and had offered a substantial amount of money for the rights. More importantly, they wanted to commission 3 additional seasons of new content with a significantly larger production budget. Marcus called a meeting with his core team, including Jade, who had become his co-executive producer. They sat in the conference room of their small production office, now decorated with Emmy awards and framed photos from various episodes. Hitchcock, now elderly and moving slowly, lay in a patch of sunlight on the floor. This is what we have been working toward, Jade said. A major platform, real money, the ability to reach millions of people instead of just the public television audience. We would be fools to turn this down. Marcus agreed with her logic, but something made him hesitant. The streaming service executives had made suggestions about the new seasons. They wanted more dramatic story arcs, faster pacing, younger participants who would appeal to their target demographics. They wanted viral moments and social media integration. They wanted, essentially, to push the show back toward reality television conventions. I did not build the show to be popular, Marcus said. I built it to be true. If we start manufacturing drama or selecting participants based on their Instagram followings, we lose what makes this matter. The team debated for hours. The money would change their lives. They could pay themselves real salaries, hire more crew members, travel to international locations. But at what cost? Would they gradually compromise the show's integrity, one small concession at a time, until it became something unrecognizable? Finally, Marcus made a decision. We will take the deal, but only if we maintain complete creative control. No network notes on content, no manufactured storylines, no intervention in how we select participants or tell stories. If they will not agree to those terms, we walk away. Jade looked skeptical. They are never going to agree to that. Networks do not give up creative control. Then we keep making the show for public television, Marcus said. We will be broke, but we will be proud of what we make. To everyone's surprise, the streaming service agreed to Marcus's terms. They had done enough research to understand that the show's authenticity was precisely what made it valuable. Trying to make it more conventional would destroy the thing they wanted to buy. So they gave Marcus and his team unprecedented creative freedom, with only one request. They wanted the first new season to feature international stories, to show that the themes of growth and amateur creativity transcended cultural boundaries. Marcus spent 6 months traveling to film the 8th season. He documented a group of elderly Japanese women learning to play taiko drums, finding community and purpose in their 70s and 80s. He filmed a group of men in rural Kenya who had started a choir, practicing harmonies while working their farms, creating beauty in the midst of poverty and hardship. He followed a community in Iceland where parents and children took pottery classes together, learning alongside each other, erasing the typical hierarchy of teacher and student. Kenji came along for part of the international filming, serving as an informal consultant and occasional on-screen presence. She had become something of an ambassador for the show's message, speaking at events and schools about the value of creative risk-taking. But she had maintained her boundaries, still working her day job and practicing music for personal enjoyment rather than professional ambition. In Japan, while filming the taiko drum group, Kenji connected with the elderly women in a profound way. They saw her as young, but she saw them as fellow beginners, all of them attempting something that society told them they were too old or too inexperienced to try. One of the women, Mrs. Tanaka, reminded Kenji of her own grandmother. Mrs. Tanaka had started learning taiko drums at 76, after her husband died. The drumming gave her a reason to get out of bed in the morning, a community that expected her presence, a creative outlet for grief and joy alike. During a break in filming, Mrs. Tanaka and Kenji sat together drinking tea. Through a translator, Mrs. Tanaka told Kenji that watching her viral piano video years ago had inspired her to join the drum group. If that American woman could try something impossible, Mrs. Tanaka had thought, then maybe I can too. Kenji was moved to learn that her moment of courage had rippled out this far, inspiring someone on the other side of the world. It reinforced something she had come to understand. When you are brave publicly, when you let people see your struggle and imperfection, you give them permission to be brave too. Your vulnerability becomes their doorway. The international season of Impossible Things premiered on the streaming service to critical acclaim and strong viewership. The show found a new, younger audience who responded to its message of authentic growth over curated perfection. In an era of Instagram filters and highlight reels, watching real people struggle and improve slowly resonated deeply. The show became part of larger cultural conversations about achievement culture, perfectionism, and the value of amateur creative pursuits. Marcus's daughter Emma graduated from high school and was accepted to film school. On the day she received her acceptance letter, she called Marcus, who was filming in Portugal. "Dad, I got in," she said, her voice bright with excitement. "I am going to study documentary filmmaking." "That is incredible, Em," Marcus said, feeling proud and slightly sad that he had missed being there in person for this moment. "You are going to be amazing at it." "I want to make work like yours," Emma said. "Stories that matter, that show real people doing real things. You taught me that is possible." After they hung up, Marcus stood on a hillside overlooking Lisbon, thinking about legacy and influence. He had spent so many years making content he was ashamed of, work that exploited people for ratings. But somehow he had found his way back to meaningful storytelling, and now his daughter was choosing to follow that path. Maybe, he thought, redemption was possible. Maybe you could make up for wasted years by doing better going forward. The 9th season of Impossible Things returned to domestic stories but with a new focus on intergenerational creative communities. Marcus filmed programs where children and elderly people learned music together, where teenagers taught technology to seniors who taught traditional crafts to teenagers. He documented how creative collaboration across age groups broke down assumptions and stereotypes, how learning together created bonds that transcended generational divides. One particularly moving story featured a prison arts program where incarcerated individuals learned to paint and write alongside volunteers from the outside community. The program was designed to humanize incarcerated people, to create spaces where they were seen as artists and learners rather than just criminals. Marcus spent 3 months filming in the prison, documenting the gradual building of trust and community between inmates and volunteers, watching creative expression become a bridge across enormous social divides. Among the incarcerated participants was a man named Derek, serving 15 years for armed robbery. Derek had never considered himself creative. He had grown up in poverty, joined a gang as a teenager, made terrible choices that landed him in prison at 23. Now at 31, he was learning to paint landscapes, spending hours mixing colors and trying to capture the beauty of places he had only seen in photographs, since he had been incarcerated since early adulthood. Marcus interviewed Derek extensively, asking him what painting meant to him. Derek spoke haltingly at first, and used to being asked about his inner life. But gradually he opened up. "Painting lets me imagine a different world," Derek said. "Out here, I am just inmate number 47832. But when I am painting, I am someone who creates beauty. That is something I never imagined I could be." The segment about the prison arts program was controversial. Some viewers felt that Marcus was romanticizing incarceration or being too sympathetic to people who had committed serious crimes. But many more viewers responded positively, saying the segment had humanized incarcerated people in a way they had not expected, had made them think differently about punishment and rehabilitation. Marcus received a letter from a corrections officer who worked at a different prison. 10 years after that reality show moment, Marcus stood backstage at a theater where Kenji was performing with her community orchestra. She caught his eye and smiled, no longer the terrified woman who had sat at a piano trembling. She had found her place, not as a virtuoso, but as someone who chose courage over comfort. Marcus realized his own journey had been similar. That manipulative television segment had accidentally saved them both, teaching them that authenticity mattered more than perfection, that trying was its own reward, that ordinary people doing extraordinary things created the most meaningful stories. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.